Okay, today is the big day. This is the big moment. We have talked about this thing called an object so many times, and I keep saying, we're gonna learn about it. We're gonna learn about it. Eventually, we're gonna learn about it. Now is the time we're going to learn about it. So an object is a terribly, terribly named idea for a way to store data. Because if you think about an object, well, think about holding anything in your hand. And if someone were to describe that item that is in your hand, the word object could fit. Any physical item that really has any sort of mass or weight to it could be considered an object. That's not very helpful. Whereas an array, basically that's a fancy developer term for a list, just a list of things. A variable, if I could spell that right, variable, is a value that changes. It's actually in the name. It is variable. In JavaScript, a number is obviously just a number, and in a function, we know that a function is actually supposed to do something. But the word object is like, what? What is an object? Now, objects have basically infinite complexity, so I think we should take this one step at a time, and we don't really have to know all of it right now. That's just going to be too much information. That will be information overload. So what I'm going to do is introduce you to objects in a more friendly manner. So we know that when we create a list in JavaScript, we can create an array. So let's say, let's create names is equal to an array, Caleb, Nathan, and Zephyr. And whoops, that was my typo there. Capital A. And so when I type in names like this, let's clear that, type names. If I wanted to get Nathan, I would have to type names, hard bracket, the number 1, and then another bracket. And that will give me the index here. But what if I wanted to store a bunch of data on a particular person? So I said a particular person, his name is Caleb, his age is 30, and he has 2 cats. Now that's nice, but we don't know if this is necessarily the right order. Because if I said, hey, out of all of these numbers, out of all of these variables rather, how many cats does Caleb have? Well, you would guess 2, but for all you know, I might have 30 cats and I've only ever mentioned 2. And so there is this gray area and we don't know how to access this properly. With an object, we can name it. So let's go ahead and create an object. So we'll create a person object, and the object just looks like this. It's a bracket, and then we give it some sort of name. So let's go ahead and actually call this name. And you can see that there are parentheses, or not parentheses. You can see that there are quotations around this. They could be single or double quotations. It does not matter. Colon, and then whatever the name is. So it's going to be, basically looks like a string is equal to, using a colon sign, is equal to pretty much any type of variable. It could be a number, it could be a function, it could be an array, it could be null, it could be another object. And let's go ahead and create another one in here. Age. My age is going to be 30, and the number of cats I have, 2. And to close this, we just give it a closing parentheses, or not a parentheses, a closing curly bracket, hit enter, and there we go. We have now an object. And instead of saying, well, this is an array where it's just like Caleb, 32 is what it said before. This now actually says age is equal to 30, cats 2, name is Caleb. So now, whenever I type person, I can type person.age, gives me 30. Person.name gives me the name. Person.cats gives me the number of cats. And now we've actually assigned a name to basically a list or an array. And you can almost think about these as internal variables. So we have a variable called person, but inside of that, there's a variable called age, a variable called name, and a variable called cats. Now, the main thing to know about an object is, yes, it comes with great naming. So you can name pretty much anything in here. So person.name actually gives me my name, which is fantastic. But you can also add to it and use the this keyword. So we've learned about that a little bit. We learned in the array lesson where we could do whatever the array is called, dot push, and that will actually push something to the array. Person doesn't quite work the same way. We can literally just create anything. So person, let's do something very interesting here. What sound does this person make? So to create a brand new data point inside of this object, it looks a lot like an array, We give it whatever sort of variable name we want in there, is equal to, and then whatever we want it to be equal to. In this case, I'm going to give this a function. And I'm going to console.log. What sound does Caleb make? What does the Caleb say? This guy says meow. I don't know why, but I'm going to say meow. Hit enter, save it. And now we can actually see the function itself. That's what it returned. It returned the function. It's called sound, has no arguments. Okay, so I just cleared that off. Now, if I actually wanted to see what is inside the person object, I could just type person, and we're going to see that there's an age, cat, name, and a sound. A sound is a function, gives us all the details in there. Now I can also just do function.sound, parentheses, because it's a function. Functions are actions. Actions need parentheses. I hit enter, make sure I've got logs turned on here so that console log actually shows up. And it says meow. And so now, not only does my person have a variable inside of it, my person also has a function inside of it. Now, when it comes to variables and functions inside of an object or inside of a class, generally they have different names, and this tells other developers what the scope is. So typically we have a variable, name is equal to Caleb. And this is just called a variable. We've seen this 100 times already. Then we also have a function something, and it does something in here. And this is called a function. When we're dealing with an object, so var new object is equal to, and name is going to be Caleb. By the way, it doesn't matter if we're using single apostrophes or quotation marks. It doesn't really matter. Hit the comma there. So the JavaScript knows there's going to be another object in here, another piece of data. This thing is no longer called variable. This is called a property. And function, so like when we wrote sound, is equal to function, something in here. This is called a method. And so going back to here, person.age is going to be a property. It acts just like a variable. Basically the same thing as a variable, but what we're saying is this variable actually belongs to an object, or in some other languages, it belongs to a class. Likewise with sound. Sound is a function, but it's inside of an object, so we call it a method. Has the exact same properties, and it works the exact same way as a function. The only difference is it's now inside of an object, so we call it a method. And this is really just a naming convention so that when you're talking to other developers, they can understand what's going on. Now, why is this important? This is important because we could say person.sound, let's overwrite this, is equal to function, and we want to console log the name. So we do this.name, and if we run person.sound, it gives me my name. Now this is where the this keyword really comes in handy, because let's take a look at this person object once more. Because we ran a function that is inside of an object, the this keyword refers to the entire object, not just the function. It's the entire object. And so inside of a function, scratch that, inside of a method, we can use this.name, this.age, this.cats, this.name. We could even return itself if we wanted to, which we're not going to, but we could return the entire object if we wanted to by just saying return this. So let's go ahead and create a brand new method in here called person.getCats. And this is going to be a function, and all this is going to do is alert the number of cats that I have, alert this.cats. In fact, let's do this. This.name concatenate has this.cats. There we go. So this is going to say Caleb has 2 cats. Let's go ahead and close that function off. Okay, that was set. If we look at the person object again, we have a function in here called getCats. We could pass parameters in there if we wanted to as well, just like a regular function. Let's run this. Person.getCats. And let me move this over. And it says Caleb has 2 cats. And so when we originally learned about the this keyword, it wasn't actually super useful, but when we start working with objects, it becomes a lot more useful. Now, why would you ever use this? Why would you ever use an object like this? Well, you could say object person is equal to Caleb, I make a sound. I have an age in here of 30, and I have cats 2. And let's just fill this out entirely. Console.log meow. So the reason we would use this is because now we can use person.name. Or had we changed this to Caleb, me, we'll just use me as an example. Caleb.name is going to be Caleb. Maybe it's my full name, Caleb Tallene. Caleb.age, well, as you read this makes more sense now. The Caleb variable, or the Caleb object, what is his age? How many cats does he have? And this becomes a lot more verbose, so as you're reading it, this actually makes a lot more sense. And you could do the same thing with pretty much anybody. So let's say we had another person in here, and his name is Zephyr, who is actually my cat. He actually says meow. His age is 4. How many cats does he have? None. He doesn't have any cat. Actually, he does. He's got one little brother. So he's got 1 cat. And now I could say Zephyr.cats, and that's going to give me 1. Or Zephyr.sound, and that's going to console log meow. Now again, where does this really come into play? Because right now we're only using one object. Well, this comes into play because up until this point, we had to store all of this into separate variables. So we would have a variable that looks something like Zephyr name is equal to whatever his name is, Zephyr. Zephyr age is equal to 4. Zephyr cats is equal to 1. Zephyr sound is equal to meow. And then we would have to do console.log Zephyr sound. And so now we've written 4 variables. And if we wanted to copy this to anyone else, we have to write 4 more variables. And if we wanted to copy this again, we'd have to, guess what? Copy and paste over and over and over again. And so now we have 12 variables in the global scope of things. So this is really just making a big mess of the global scope. Whereas with a beautiful object, we get just the regular variable name, plus we get these properties and methods inside of it. Now, just as a quick little refresher here, I missed that one in there. As a quick little refresher in here, let's take a look at the syntax of an object. So object syntax is going to look like this. You've got a variable of some type, and then you've got your variable name is equal to an object. So that's your opening and closing curly brackets in there. And then you've got a key, colon, not pair, value. And then if you have more, you throw a comma in there, and then you go key 2, value 2. Again, if you got more, throw a comma in there. Otherwise, that last one does not have a comma. And then when you want to access any of this, you could just write object name. And sort of like how we access things in an array, instead of using 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on and so on, we just use the key name. So key is going to return value. And likewise, key 2 is going to return value 2. Now that's the overall gist behind an object. You're probably not going to use these too often until you get a lot more experience with JavaScript, and then all of a sudden they'll be everywhere. You sort of go from 0 to 100 in like 5 seconds. As soon as you start seeing them, you're going to start using them all over the place. But as you're just learning JavaScript, you're not going to use these all over the place. Not yet. So what I would like you to do, a little task for this video, just create an object. Maybe it's you. So create variable, whatever your name is, create the object, give it a name, a sound, an age, maybe your favorite food, maybe your website, and then just try to execute some of the stuff inside of your browser's console. Go ahead and give that a shot. Don't forget, if you have questions, comments, concerns, you can leave them down below. I am here to help you at a moment's glance. Objects are a very interesting thing in JavaScript. I hope this explanation was all right. This is one of those hurdles when it comes to programming, is understanding objects. But once you get it, there is no going back. So definitely get some practice in there. It's going to be very, very important down the road.